I was a cigarette smoker on two separate occasions in my life. The first time for about 7 years, in my late 20s and early 30s. I picked it up because I was doing community theater with a bunch of other people, and after rehearsals we'd go out to the bar and they'd all be sitting there smoking, so I wound up doing it too, just for fun. But it's true what they say. Habits like that can sneak up on you. And even after I was in a different place, not hanging out with that same crowd anymore, I was in graduate school, I was taking care of an elderly relative. My life was pretty busy and pretty stressful, and nicotine felt like a relief, a little bit of time off from all of that. And I understood it wasn't good for me. I was born the year before the Surgeon General's report in the US came out and started talking about how bad nicotine and tobacco are for you. It's not like I'd never heard this before. I'd seen my parents smoke when I was young and I'd seen them quit. One of them had an easy time quitting and the other didn't. I was fully aware of the situation. I just decided that I could afford to gamble. And then it was hard to quit that first time, but I did it. And then a few years later, in the early aughts, I was working in another very stressful job, and a couple of my colleagues would go out on smoke breaks, and I would join them. Lo and behold, I got tempted again, and for another couple of years, I was smoking, I guess up to a pack a day. I don't remember. I'm sure it was more than that sometimes. Not a good thing. Not a good thing. But of course, everybody thinks that they just have to give you the word about how this is bad for you, and that'll solve things. So a friend of mine who's a social worker sat down with me one day in my living room and said, "Listen, you're not going to like this, but I have to have a conversation with you." And I said, "Hon, I know exactly where you're going to go with this. Please don't right now. It's not going to help." And she's basically said, "I don't care, you need to hear this," and then went on the spiel about how I needed to quit smoking because it was bad for me. Okay. I quit about 2 months later. But the way that her words factored into my quit process was complicated, because me saying, "Look, I understand what you're going to talk about, and I already admit that you're right, but please don't do it right this minute," and her saying, "Nope, tough, I don't care." Well, the "I don't care" was the part that I really heard. And I thought, yeah, I believe you. That was the most stressful thing that happened to me in that month. And I was already smoking too much because of stress. So when I quit, I realized, hey, I gotta find a way to tone down the stress in my life, because once I do that, it'll be easier to kick this dumb habit that I allowed myself to get drawn into again. And one of the ways I reduced the stress in my life is I stopped talking to her for a couple of years, because I didn't need another person in my life who was going to play the "I don't care, you need to hear this" game when I had already told them, "Listen, I'm the kind of person who doesn't do well with that." I understood my needs better than she did, and I was particularly intrigued that as a social worker, she decided to, one-up me on things. When I say that the way we approach our personal health and fitness and exercise and wellness needs to be tailored to the individual, this is exactly the kind of thing I'm talking about. And when I talk about the risk of making things worse with the best intentions, I'm speaking from experience. And it isn't just that I'm some person who reacts negatively when somebody gives me the tough talk. I've given other people the tough talk, and I've seen it blow up worse than I could have imagined. And I've seen loads of other people besides me who have the same kind of response. I was so stressed out after that talk with her, I smoked more for a couple of days, and I felt myself doing it, and I knew it was stupid. And I was drowning in the negative feelings from somebody in my life intentionally making things harder for me when I told them, you're about to make things harder for me. Because they were so full of their feelings that that's what they needed to get out. The lesson from all of this is that even with the best intentions, we don't always do the right thing. I didn't intend to get addicted to nicotine a second time, but I did. My good intentions and my fantasy that I could do whatever the hell I want and get through it, nope. But her good intentions weren't any more use to me than mine were. The solution wasn't what she thought it was. In a roundabout way, she contributed, but I'll tell you what, I've never forgotten it. And there are still situations where I wouldn't trust her with something complicated going on in my life because I don't think she handles it very well. No matter what your situation is, you can and will find a path through it. And you should continue to try that. It was very good for me to continue to face my problem with nicotine and take steps to resolve it. So go ahead, do that work. But don't assume that what somebody else thinks is your healing path or your path out of a problem. Don't assume that they have the story that's going to fix you. Maybe it will, maybe it won't. Figure it out on your own. If you've made it this far in the video, first of all, thank you. Second of all, if this video or any of my others have entertained you, made you smile, taught you something, given you some support on your own journey for mental or physical health and fitness, please consider subscribing to the channel. And if that's too much of a commitment right now, please at least give it a thumbs up. Thanks for your time, thanks for your support, thanks for your attention. Go kick some butt, including your own, in a good way. Love ya.